The loudest person in the room is very often the least powerful. That sounds backwards, I know. Most people are taught to believe that power is volume, speed, constant presence. Speak first. Speak more. Fill the silence before someone else does. But if you watch human behavior closely, really closely, you begin to notice something uncomfortable. The people who need to prove their strength usually cannot stop displaying it. And the ones who do not need to prove very much at all? They are often the quiet ones. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength in the modern world. People confuse it with shyness, with weakness, with social awkwardness. They assume that if you are not competing for attention, you must not deserve it. That if you are not explaining yourself every 5 minutes, you must have nothing to say. That is a childish reading of human nature, because silence, when it comes from fear, does make a person small. But silence, when it comes from self-possession, does something very different. It slows the room down. It changes the balance. It forces people to wonder what you see that they do not. And that is where its power begins. There are 7 reasons quiet people often carry more influence, more control, and more inner stability than anyone notices at first glance. The funny part is, most of that power has nothing to do with other people. It comes from what silence protects inside you. The 7th reason is simple. Silent people learn things that noisy people miss. A person who talks constantly is usually listening only long enough to prepare the next sentence. You can see it happen. Their face nods, but their mind is already halfway into a story about themselves. They are not receiving anything. They are waiting for their turn to perform. Quiet people tend to do the opposite. They leave space. They let other people keep talking. And once people feel that space, they fill it. They reveal preferences, insecurities, habits, grudges, ambitions, fears. Not because the quiet person manipulated them. No. People simply like to explain themselves when no one interrupts. It happens at work all the time. In the first 10 minutes of a meeting, one person tries to dominate the table. Another person says very little, just enough to stay present. At the end of the meeting, guess who usually understands the room better? Guess who knows which idea frightened people, which detail bored them, who wants credit, who wants safety, who is bluffing? The one who was paying attention. This matters far beyond conversation. If you do not observe well, life feels confusing. You keep saying, "I didn't see that coming," but often it was coming for weeks. The warning signs were there in tone, timing, hesitation, little changes in behavior. Noise covered them up. A quiet mind catches what a busy ego misses. And here is the part people rarely admit. Many of us talk too much when we are nervous. We explain, joke, fill the gap, over-answer, overshare. Not because we are expressive by nature, but because silence makes us feel exposed. The moment goes still, and suddenly we hear our own uncertainty. That is precisely why learning to stay quiet for a moment is so valuable. It forces you to become a better witness. The 6th reason is that silence interrupts emotional impulsiveness. Most damage in adult life is not done by villains in dark coats. It is done by ordinary people in heated moments. A text sent too quickly, an insult thrown across a room, a resignation letter written at midnight, a confession made out of loneliness, a promise made out of guilt. The human mind is not especially wise when agitated. Silence places a small, blessed distance between feeling and action. When something stings your pride, the immediate urge is to answer, to defend yourself, to correct the record, to say the thing that will make the other person understand exactly how wrong they are. And very often, that urge has the emotional maturity of a child kicking a chair. A quiet person is not someone who never feels anger. Usually, it is the opposite. They may feel things deeply, but somewhere along the line, They learned that not every emotion deserves a public performance. That is a serious kind of power. Imagine a man being criticized unfairly in front of colleagues. One version of him reacts instantly. His voice tightens. He starts listing facts. He becomes sharp, maybe sarcastic. By the end of the exchange, he may be correct, but he has also handed the room his composure. Another version takes a breath, says very little, lets the moment pass just long enough for the heat to leave his bloodstream. Later, he responds clearly, maybe privately, maybe in writing, maybe with clean facts instead of wounded pride. Same man, same insult, different life. You do not need fewer emotions. You need a little more space between the emotion and your mouth. Most people never build that space. They think authenticity means immediate expression. It does not. Sometimes what people call honesty is simply poor impulse control wearing a respectable hat. And if that sounds severe, good. It should. 1 minute of undisciplined speech can create problems that take years to clean up. The fifth reason silence is powerful is that it gives weight to your words. When a person speaks all the time, their words lose density. This is not cruelty, it is just how attention works. Constant output becomes wallpaper. People stop leaning in because they no longer expect anything important to arrive. But when someone is measured, when they do not speak just to hear themselves exist, their words begin to matter more. People listen differently. A sentence from them carries shape and consequence. You have probably felt this without naming it. There is always someone in a family, a classroom, or an office who rarely says much. Then one day they speak plainly, maybe only one sentence, and the whole atmosphere changes. Everyone knows instinctively that this person does not waste language, so if they chose to use it now, it means something. Silence makes speech expensive, and expensive things are treated carefully. This is one reason wise people do not rush to explain themselves to everyone. They understand that constant self-justification cheapens their voice. If every misunderstanding gets a 10-minute defense, your speech starts sounding like panic. Calm people do not do that. They clarify what matters, then they let the dust settle. Notice, I am not praising coldness. I am not telling you to become emotionally unavailable and stare into the fireplace like a tragic poet. We are speaking about restraint, not distance. Warmth still matters. Kindness still matters. But words should come from intention, not leakage. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. When you speak, do people feel invited to listen, or do they feel trapped in your overflow? That question alone can improve a life. The fourth reason quiet people seem powerful is that silence protects self-respect. There is a particular kind of regret adults know well. It is not always the regret of what we did. Sometimes it is the regret of what we said while trying too hard to be understood, accepted, forgiven, chosen, or kept. People abandon their dignity in speech long before they abandon it in action. They over-explain to those who have already decided not to understand. They plead where a boundary would have been cleaner. They continue arguments long after the truth has stopped mattering. They reveal private hurt to people who have not earned access to it. Not because they are foolish, because they are desperate for closure, reassurance, relief. Silence in these moments is not passivity, it is containment. A quiet person often learns that not every door should be knocked on twice. Not every accusation needs to be untangled. Not every cold message deserves a warmer reply. There are times when the most self-respecting thing you can do is stop offering pieces of yourself into a place that keeps mishandling them. That lesson is expensive. Most people buy it after they have humiliated themselves once or twice. A woman sends 5 messages trying to fix what one honest conversation could not fix. A man keeps trying to prove his worth to people who enjoy watching him try. Someone sits awake at 2 a.m. drafting the perfect paragraph that will finally make another human being become decent. It almost never works. Silence can save you from those late-night negotiations with your own dignity. And yes, it is hard. Silence feels brutal when your heart wants resolution. It feels unfinished. It feels unfair. But self-respect is often built in unfinished moments, in the decision not to crawl after clarity from someone who profits from your confusion. That kind of quiet has steel in it. The third reason is that silence sharpens your inner voice. Now we arrive at something deeper. Most people are not only surrounded by noise, they are filled with it. Opinions from family, expectations from culture, trends, advice, commentary, urgency, comparison. The world is loud in 1,000 subtle ways, and after a while people begin to mistake that noise for their own mind. They say they want something, but if you sit with them long enough, you realize they want what would make them look acceptable, or impressive, or safe, not what actually fits them. Silence helps you hear the difference. A man spends 10 years chasing a promotion he does not even enjoy because applause has become louder than intuition. A student chooses a path that sounds respectable at dinner tables, then wonders why every morning feels heavy. A person stays in relationships that look right from the outside because they no longer trust the quiet discomfort that rises when they are alone. This is why some people are terrified of silence. It tells the truth before the mouth does. When you sit quietly, without entertainment, without immediate distraction, things surface. Fatigue, grief, envy, relief, old anger, real desire. Not always pleasant companions, but they are honest ones. And until you can hear them clearly, your life will be built partly from borrowed instructions. A quiet person, especially one who has learned to reflect instead of merely withdraw, gains access to a kind of internal authority. They do not become immune to doubt, no one does, but they become less easy to steer by outside noise. That is rare, and rare things often look strange to people who have never practiced them. If you are not easily provoked by trends, not desperate to join every chorus, not eager to explain your choices to spectators, some will call you distant. Let them. Half the world calls independence a flaw when it cannot invoice you for it. The second reason silence carries power is that it changes your relationship with attention. Most people are hungry for attention in ways they do not fully admit, not because they are vain monsters, because attention feels like proof. Proof that they matter, proof that they are visible, proof that they are not being forgotten, so they chase it. Constant posting, constant talking, constant reacting, constant signaling. Their nervous system becomes attached to being noticed, and once that attachment takes hold, they become easier to control than they realize. Praise can steer them. Rejection can break them. Being ignored can make them betray their own standards just to get back into view. Quiet people are not automatically free from this, but many of them discover something important sooner than others. Attention is pleasant. It is not the same thing as worth. That distinction can change your entire posture in life. When you stop treating visibility as oxygen, you become much harder to shake. You no longer need to win every room. You do not need every joke to land. You do not need to broadcast every success, every injury, every opinion before it has had time to mature. There is a steadiness that enters a person when they no longer perform themselves non-stop. A steadiness people can feel even if they do not have language for it. Have you noticed how calm confidence often appears almost quiet? Not because the person lacks fire, but because they are not leaking energy in 10 directions at once. They can sit still. They can leave some thoughts unsaid. They can let attention pass over them without panicking. That is not invisibility. It is freedom from addiction to being seen. And now we come to the first reason. The strongest power of silence is that it teaches you who you are when nothing is clapping. Strip away the audience for a moment. No applause, no replies, no admiration, no immediate feedback. No one rewarding your cleverness. No one confirming your pain. No one watching the performance. What remains? That question makes many people deeply uneasy. Because a surprising amount of modern identity is built in public. We know how to present ourselves. We know how to signal values, competence, humor, insight. But sit alone in a quiet room long enough, and a harder question arrives. Are you still solid when no one is reflecting you back to yourself? Silence is where that answer gets built. This is why quiet people can seem strangely resilient. Their center is less dependent on constant external response. They may still enjoy approval, of course. They are human, but they are not entirely manufactured by it. They have spent enough time in stillness to meet the unpolished version of themselves. The bored version, the restless version, the grieving version, the ordinary version. And because they have met those selves, they are less frightened by them. There is enormous strength in no longer needing to run from your own company. A person who can sit alone, think clearly, endure discomfort, and remain intact is carrying a form of wealth the noisy world does not know how to measure. It will not always look glamorous. It may never trend. But when life becomes difficult, and it always does, this is the kind of power that keeps a human being from collapsing into every storm. Because silence has been training them all along. Not training them to dominate others, not training them to appear mysterious and superior in some cheap theatrical way. Training them to stay with themselves, to observe before reacting, to choose speech instead of spilling it, to leave what degrades them, to hear what is true beneath what is loud. That is why the quiet ones are so often underestimated. People think they are absent when they are actually gathering data, gathering discipline, gathering self-knowledge, gathering enough inner order that when they finally act, the action is clean. The world, unfortunately, rewards display more quickly than depth. Noise rises faster. It gets noticed sooner. It may even get promoted sooner. But a life built only on display is fragile. The first serious conflict, the first loss of validation, the first season of rejection, and suddenly the whole structure rattles. Depth behaves differently. Depth does not need to announce itself every hour. It waits. It forms. It endures. So, if you have ever been told you are too quiet, do not rush to defend yourself. First, ask a better question. Is your silence coming from fear or from steadiness? Those are not the same thing. Fear-based silence shrinks your life. Steady silence strengthens it. One hides, the other sees. If your silence is fear, then yes, your work is to grow braver, to speak when truth requires it, to ask for what matters, to stop disappearing from your own life. But if your silence comes from observation, restraint, and self-respect, then do not let a noisy culture shame you out of it. You do not need to become louder to become stronger. You may simply need to become more deliberate. Speak when your words can improve something. Stay quiet when speech would only drain you. Let people underestimate you if they insist on reading volume as value. Human beings have been making that mistake for centuries. A river does not need to argue with a fountain. One is decorative, the other shapes stone. And perhaps that is the real secret beneath all this. Silence is not empty. Silence is where form is made. Character is made there. Judgment is made there. Self-command is made there. The world hears only the final sentence, but the sentence gets its force from all the quiet places that came before it. That is why the calm person in the corner can sometimes carry more real power than the loudest voice at the center. They have learned how not to spend themselves carelessly. They have learned how to listen. They have learned how to remain. And in a world that cannot stop shouting, that kind of person becomes impossible to ignore for very long. Tell me honestly, have you ever mistaken your own silence for weakness when it was actually the beginning of your strength?